All right, guys, we are back on the Next Level Agents podcast, and I'm excited about today's episode. I get excited about a lot of episodes, but not as much as this one because I get to introduce you guys to somebody who I've gotten to talk to quite a bit over the last, I guess, 8, 9 months now. Uh, my personal coach, Kamille Rose Taylor. Kamille, how's it going?
Good, good. I'm excited to be on, Kevin. And it's cool because even before we hit the record button, I mean, we have no idea what we're going to talk about on this podcast. So I'm excited to sort of let the organic conversation flow. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's funny. Somebody asked me, they wanted to send me questions before we recorded something. This was, I think, last week.
Mm.
Maybe it was a week before. And I was like, you can send them, but I'm not going to look at them. Like part of my excitement is I get to find out what I'm going to say at the same time everybody else does. And so knowing that this conversation will go wherever it goes, I'm sure it'll be fun. So Kamille, why don't we start with this? Can you, obviously I just introduced you, but would you give the elevator pitch on what exactly is it that you do? Like I can see even just looking at your website or looking at your Zoom, like you're a peak performance coach. But I think for a lot of people, that's not tangible.
Yeah.
Is there a way, how do you explain what you do?
Sure. I would say that I help very driven, ambitious individuals, mostly entrepreneurs. I do work with a lot of realtors, fulfill their ultimate potential. I'd say the end result that we're all looking for. But on a very personal level, what I get to do is work on really the mindset, the psychology of these very driven and ambitious people, many of which are the people who might be listening to this, and obviously you, Kevin. And when I say get to work on the mindset, you probably have experienced this as well, but I've found that success very much is the 10 to 20% of strategy and tactics, and then 80 to 90% of it is the psychology of the individual. And that's also my educational background. So I went to Berkeley, I studied psychology and mass communications. I got to double major, but it came after failing out of the pre-med program. So I want y'all to know my fan title has come with a lot of embarrassment and failure. I think like many entrepreneurs, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist for a while. And science and math were not my jam. I just could not cut it at Berkeley. And I remember going to my guidance counselor about my second year of college, crying because it was my first time like failing classes and just feeling like a complete idiot. And you got to understand, prior to that, in high school, elementary school, all of that, I was like a straight A student body president, captain of the basketball team, National Honor Society. So I was so used to performing at a high level. And then I get to this place in my academic career in which I am failing for the first time ever in my life. And I'm having this sort of identity crisis. It's like, wait a minute, how did I go from being top of my class to now I'm like feeling at the bottom of my class? And that's because I was competing with a bunch of people who are also number one in their high school. So it was just different. I was just playing a different level game. I was also with other people who are extremely intelligent and driven and hardworking. And I was very blessed, I would say, because the counselor who I spoke with looked at my grades, assessed them, and she was like, all right, Kamille, let me just ask you, why do you want to be a doctor? And the very first thing that came out of my mouth, I'm like a 19-year-old at the time trying to figure out my life, which is a lot of pressure to put on a 19-year-old. I still am baffled why we do that today. And I just said, I just want to help heal people. And she looked at me with such compassion in her eyes. I'll never forget this because she goes, oh, honey, there is more than one way to heal a person. And at the time, it didn't click, right? I grew up in a Filipino family. So to me, there were kind of three job choices. I could be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. That was just kind of my culture that I grew up in. And I didn't know what she meant by that. And she assessed the rest of my grades and she goes, you know what, you may not be doing so well at organic chemistry, but you're crushing it in psychology, you're crushing it in political science, in your debate classes. And she pointed out all my strengths. She said, this is a time for you to focus on what you're great at and what you love to do. So why don't we work on that and pick a major that is focused on your strengths and what you're passionate about? And at the time, I didn't know that was a choice. Like I thought you go, you do the route, whatever, doctor, lawyer, engineer, you get the job, you do the job, you make the money. And I just thought that was like the one course in life. This was the first time somebody gave me permission to just say like, well, actually, you're actually really good at this. Have you ever considered that? And I didn't know whatever that was. And she gave me like a whole list of different job opportunities at the time that I could take up. I didn't know those were things. So long answer to your very short question of, what is it that I do? But that's a little bit of the background of how psychology became part and parcel, because truly I wanted to help people heal from whatever essentially I found out, just the mindset patterns, the stories. And I hate to be so crass, but sort of the stupid BS that we tell ourselves
Yeah.
that block us from that next level, to use your podcast name, of our life. And so that's really what I honed my expertise on, is how do I help people overcome a lot of these subconscious programming, conditioning. Even in our body, we carry a lot of stress. We don't even know it, but to be able to help people in that way. So that became my healing, if you will, is for high achievers to overcome that. Because a lot of people think, oh, Kevin is crushing it in business. He's doing this, he's doing that. And they see what's on the outside. But what they often don't know is they're still human. You have no idea what's going on behind the curtain. Like, they are either struggling as much as you, or they just have different stressors or different pressure on them. And so that's where I come in for a lot of those folks who, I call it, we overcompensate with work and business, but we're struggling too.
Yeah. They see the highlight reel, whether intended or not. That's what people see. I know for me, you've got like two people on, I mean, there's lots of different kind of people that show up on social media, but some of them are like, I'm gonna just show you the good stuff because I want to be cool. And then there's other people who are like, I kind of want to show the bad stuff, but I also don't want to give it any power. So I try not to talk about it publicly and ask for more of it. And then you get the people that only talk about the bad stuff, right? So you got these, and so I think you're right. People look on the outside and they see people, regardless of how well they are or aren't doing, and we tell ourselves these stories about them, and so that they must be doing great. But the reality is, even people that are doing great aren't doing great everywhere. Like, no one's ever batting 1,000 all the way around. It's part of life. It's the human experience. I wonder how lucky you are. I wonder who else is a 19-year-old college student that actually gets someone to have that conversation with them when they're failing, and how many people would have actually just left college altogether instead of like digging back in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was almost my story, because one of the reasons I was crying is I was working with a very limited budget. So I grew up with a single mother, and she said, we've got enough for exactly 4 years, but that's it. And we didn't really want to take out student loans and that whole nine. Thankfully, kind of knew back then that was going to be a dangerous place if I started digging myself into that sort of pattern. And so by second year, you had to declare your major at Berkeley. And I'm thinking, like, I just spent 2 years and I don't know what to declare. I don't even know if this is going to count. Am I going to finish in the next 2 years? And so I wanted to bow out, but it really, again, I don't, whether you call it luck, blessing, grace, but that counselor spoke the words that I needed in that moment to just let me know, hey, you're really great at this. Let's work on that. Like, meaning there is something for you in this world based off the very unique set of skills you have. Like, you don't have to just fit into the marketplace, but rather maybe you can start creating a marketplace, or maybe there's a marketplace you've never even heard of. But again, so a 19-year-old, I didn't know that was a thing. I just told I was supposed to get a job. So when I got full permission to really study what I wanted, which ended up being both psychology, and Berkeley at the time called it mass communications, which was really the study of, I guess you could say, social psychology. So I studied marketing, branding, that whole nine. And I ended up going from failing at one major to getting 2 bachelor degrees in half the time, because I loved it so much. I ended up doing 2 degrees in 2 years versus failing just barely one in those first 2 years. So it's interesting when you start doing what you love. I know it's an old cliche, but it really didn't feel like work. Like, I was so passionate about what I was studying that I was like, yeah, let's do this.
I've got a mastermind group I'm a part of, and part of this quarter's meeting, we read a book, and for me it was a revisit. It's one of my favorite books ever. Probably read it 10 times in the last 2 years, called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And one of the things that Naval talks about is, like, when you're really, I don't remember if he uses zone of genius or the language that like Dan Kennedy uses, which is escaping me in this moment. Unique ability. But one of the things he says is, like, when you're doing that thing that you're meant to do, it feels like play to you and it looks like work to others. And
Oh,
I
that's great.
think that's how you go from, gosh, I might fail out completely, to, no, I'm actually going to turn this around in 2 years and get 2 degrees instead of one, is because you absolutely landed in the right place for you.
Yeah, exactly. And it is that state of flow where you're right. It's so fun for me, but it is work. I mean, academia is no joke. Like the rigors of the things I need to study, the research, the papers, all of that. It was a ton of work. I had many sleepless nights, but it's a different type of work. It's not the, oh my gosh, I hate this so much. What am I doing? And 1 minute feels like, 1 hour. It's the opposite, where an
Yeah.
hour goes by and I just feel like, oh my gosh, I can read this forever. Like, let's keep learning about this. Like, this is so fascinating to me. And I want to speak to whoever might be listening right now who thinks like, oh gosh, like that's not a big deal that I do that. Everybody does that. Don't underestimate what comes easy to you, because often the thing that comes easy to you may be the very strength that somebody else is looking for. So take, for example, I know you and I talk often, but I tell you, Kevin, the way you describe how you meet people and network with them and connect with them, I'm like, man, you're so good at it. And to you, you're like, what do you mean? I'm just talking to people. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. There's so many people out there who they have a very difficult time connecting genuinely with other people, not because they're inauthentic people, but they just don't have that skill set or they don't know how to do that. The fact that it comes so easy to you, I wouldn't just like overlook that. Um,
Yeah. I actually was sharing with somebody, a good friend of mine, um, this past Friday. I was telling her about some of the conversations you and I have had, and how you like really literally showed me a few things that, like, quite frankly, left me speechless, because I was like,
Mm.
oh God, there was a couple moments where I'm like, okay, now I've got all of these examples in my head of when now my life makes sense, or these moments in my life made sense after you like walked me through a few things. And I was just telling her about how valuable that was, and how I've, you know, really worked to like lean into that now, instead of just assuming that's just, yeah, everybody does that. When in reality is, not everybody does do everything. And everybody does have their own unique ability and things that they lean into, like obviously like you did, and like you're doing. So so you get through college. What happens next? Like, do you go straight into sort of psychology? Do you, because you mentioned marketing, do you spend some time there?
Yeah, so I the first I'd say introduction into possibly figuring out what I wanted to do, because it's not like I studied psychology, mass communications, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a peak performance coach. I'm going to be an executive coach, because I didn't even know that was a thing. That came to me very later on. I mean, I graduated back in 2008 when the market crashed. And I would say the coaching world really started getting popularized just in the last maybe like 8, no more than 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm not that far out from, you know, when I realized it, but it's not nearly as popular as it is now. So the first time I kind of dipped my toe into what exactly do I want to do, I worked for about 1 year at Napa State Mental Hospital, and I worked with mentally ill ex-convicts. So, and that's because in psychology, when I was studying it, one of my favorite subjects was abnormal psychology. So, getting to study individuals who had multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And I thought, yeah, maybe I just want to be a psychiatrist. Maybe that's the field I want to go into. So, I took an internship. I worked at the hospital for 1 year, and I very quickly realized this is not the scene for me. Studying in theory and then practicing it in acute care are two totally different things. And
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of folks who study things and they just go, oh, yeah, I totally want to do that. I'm like, that's great. Try it out for free first, where you're not getting paid. And then if you still want to do it afterwards, then I would consider that for a career. Because what I realized was, I would say I am too soft, meaning I get so attached to people's stories and I want so much to help them. It was really hard for me to sit in the hospital setting because these patients were very extreme cases, and it was medicate and sedate. That's it. Just like keep them comfortable, give them the medication, and they're just going to stay this way. It wasn't really rehabilitation.
Right.
And that was very hard for me to accept. I couldn't do it. I was just like, no, there's got to be a way. And it's like, well, according to the AMA or the medical journal, this, and this, and this. And I think that was my first taste of saying, oh, I'm kind of rebellious. I'm kind of unemployable. Because every time they gave me a rule, I was like, no, like there's got to be another way. Maybe there's alternative medicine, or, maybe you could do psychotherapy. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's great for you. But if someone's been catatonic, literally staring at a wall for 10 years straight and not speaking, you think you can break through to them in like 5 minutes? So that's how I knew, oh, I don't think this is right for me, because my colleagues who were with me were not thinking the way that I was thinking. They were very much like, oh, I love this. I want to continue to help people this way. And I think that was beautiful. Like that was their calling. I just quickly realized it wasn't mine. So another like, okay, I studied this thing, but I can't work in a hospital. I can't be this. What am I going to do now? And when I graduated 2008, if y'all remember, that's when the market crashed. Now, the mass communication side stepped in and I was like, okay, I can't work in a hospital. Let me go work for big media, because I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to do broadcast journalism. I'm going to take my communications degree, my marketing. I'll take some of my psychology, but I'll communicate to the world, because that was another thing I'd love to do, is public speaking. And so I interned at CNN in Washington, D.C. So kind of picture this for a second. I go from growing up here in Los Angeles, I'm a SoCal girl, go up to Berkeley, California, and I'm living kind of with hippies and all that up there, studying in academia, my little liberal academic bubble. And then now I'm living in Washington, D.C. First time living in the East Coast. I don't know what a winter is like. I didn't pack any boots or coats, and I'm walking to the subway in the snow in the fall, it like flats on, and I'm just like freezing my little California butt off. And I'm walking into the CNN broadcast room. I've got what I thought was my dream, intern position at the time. And I was working at the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. So my job was essentially to hand him his scripts. That was my internship for like a whole year. And then I worked with some of the producers in what they called long form news documentary, which was basically we would take a story, kind of follow it for a couple of months. And then I worked in that world. Now, this is 2008. So if you remember, in the fall of 2008, that was when Barack Obama became president in his first term. That is also when the market crashed. So what a unique time
Yeah.
to be in Washington, D.C. At CNN. And I saw everything from our first African-American president being elected and announced on our news station. In fact, I had a BlackBerry at the time. And I remember we would always get the news about 10 minutes before all of the states got their vote counts for the presidential election. So me and my producer already knew he was going to win about 10 minutes before the entire country did. So that was a crazy experience in and of itself. And then also the market crash. And the story that I often tell people is I remember being in the director's room, because it was such a crazy day. And it was my first time really seeing the behind the scenes of what it's like to be an anchor on the news. So I know a lot of people, crap on broadcast journalists, and they're like, oh, the news media, they're trying to manipulate you and this and this. I will say that some of that might be true, but I also give mad respect to the people who do it, because that job is very difficult. What a lot of folks don't know is someone like Wolf Blitzer, he's got an earpiece in, and he's got a director, another journalist in his other ear. He's reading the prompter, and he's trying to get the live feed of the person coming up. So you've always got about 100 different things happening, and he has to deliver it live to a worldwide audience. It's a lot of pressure that they carry. So it's really interesting. And I got to see that. And the day that the market crashed, my only job was to pick up this thing called the red phone. And what the red phone was, I guess it was kind of like a little emergency line. Like if somebody needed to give breaking news, I had to tell the director right away, and they had to change all of the things on the TV. That's where y'all see like, oh, breaking news, this just happened, right? And so I just sat there, and the crazy, situation room is happening. People are yelling at each other. People are typing up all these different things. And one moment, the little red phone rings, and I kind of freeze, because again, I'm an intern. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And all these really professional East Coaster, news people are looking at me like, pick up the damn phone. Like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, oh. And so I pick up the phone, and someone just yells at me like, tell Dave, I think that was the director's name at the time, tell Dave the market's gonna effing crash. And I was like, hello? They're like, just tell him. And then they just hung up, and everyone's looking at me like, and I, in a very shaky voice, I just say, someone said, tell Dave the market's gonna crash. And I swear the room went from noise and movement to just eerie dead silence. Like no one spoke, because I had no idea what it really meant. And they all looked at Dave, and then Dave just sort of put his head down, And then he's like, all right, run it. And then everyone went back to work. And then a couple seconds later, I just see like, US market hits biggest stock market crash ever, blah, 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 blah. I'm just standing there like, did I just kind of become the intermediary for that news to break, which would change the trajectory of so much in that year, right? So that was another step into, well, is this what I want to do? And again, it was another one of like, no, I can't handle this stress. Like, this is too much. And going back to my rebellious nature, when I found out how the news was really written, because I got to sit in some of those copy rooms, truthfully, Kevin, I knew that, oh, I'm going to be that one person who goes off script and not wanting to read what's on the prompter and like say something else, because I can't. And I think that was the beginning of me realizing, I think I just need to do something else, because I wasn't very good at following corporate rules, if you will. And my first job actually that I could find after that whole market crash, because it was a very difficult job market, was at a nonprofit, very close to my hometown. And I did the one thing I didn't want to do at the time, which was I was a director of middle school and high school youth groups to help them fundraise for 6 kids in our community. Now, when I say it's the one thing I didn't want to do, is because when I was 22, the last thing I wanted to do was work with high schoolers and middle school. That was just something in my head at the time. I was like, I don't want to work with kids. They annoy me. And life would have it, that was exactly where I was placed. It was like, all right, your first job is with middle school and high school students, and you're going to work at a nonprofit. Now, here's where it kind of took a turn for me. While my job at the nonprofit was to help these kids learn how to create fundraisers, what I quickly realized were 2 things. Number one, I loved working alongside with the CEO. So the founder of the organization was the one who found me. She hired me. And then I ended up becoming kind of her right-wing woman, if you will. And I got an insider's view into, this is what it's like to run your own organization. Like, it is so much stress. It's hard running a team. It's hard having a vision. It's a hard, being the only person that everybody goes to. But I loved supporting her and kind of being in the room with her and being like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Are you okay? And I would just have insight on things that maybe she couldn't see. And that was my way of contributing back to her personally. Now, on the kids' end, number 2, what I realized was, while they were doing these fundraisers for other kids in the community, I was kind of training them like little business people, because they would do these lemonade stands. And I would say, all right, here's your inventory. Here's the cost of your inventory. Give me your employee schedule, like, hey, they're volunteers. Now tell me how much profit you're going to have at the end. And then once we're done with that, we're going to calculate it and we're going to donate it to the families. But I was teaching them how to run like little businesses, if you will. And that sort of kind of set me on this path, like, oh, maybe there's different ways to serve and help people. And it wasn't until I hit a breaking point when I was about 27. So I'd say like 5 or 6 years from that nonprofit work. I ended up working in the Philippines. I did branding and marketing development out there for a while, because I had a family member who had a business out there. Worked alongside another entrepreneur, absolutely loved it, got to travel a little bit. But when I came back to the States, I felt really lost. I was like, okay, that was a cool stint. I did, leadership development for a nonprofit for a while. I did marketing and branding in the Philippines. But now that I'm back in LA, now what? And I remember feeling a little lost. And I was like, you know what? I've always loved reading self-development books. Let me actually try to apply some of this work. So I always read like the Tony Robbins, the Oprahs, the Deepak Chopras, things like that. But I never did the work. I was always a fan of the quotes, a fan of the books, but I didn't invest in myself, if I'm being honest. Like, I felt good. I did the feel good stuff, but I didn't do the uncomfortable stuff that they would teach. And one day when I was doing a little bit of a gig for a friend, they own real estate businesses, and I was doing some of their marketing and branding, just kind of in between figuring out what I really wanted to do next. I went to my desk and I got this Tony Robbins flyer for Unleash the Power Within, his premier seminar, where he would kind of go 4 days of like intense jumping, as people like to call it.
It's so much jumping.
It is. Have you been to one of them?
Yeah. So much jumping.
Yeah, well, and I was at a place in my life where I was feeling really lost. I had just gotten out of a relationship and I was feeling really hurt by that. So there were just a lot of things where I think I was just at that age of, what am I going to do with my life again? Even though, again, I had this great degree from Berkeley, I still wasn't sure what to do with it. And I was like, you know what? Let me just go. Whatever little money I had saved, I'll buy this ticket. I'll fly to Chicago. That's where his seminar was at the time. I'm single. Let's go. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, as you
What
know.
what year was this? 2015?
Mm, no, I think the year 2013,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah. What
Just
did you
curious
go in
because
2015?
I went to Chicago and I think it was 2015 was the UPW I went to. I think I'll have to go back and double check.
Okay.
Anyways, sorry, I didn't
Did
mean to throw you off there. I just was
no, no, no.
curious.
I did go back a couple more times. So if you were in any of his LA UPWs, I did go to that one. Did you ever go to that?
No, just Chicago, which I think technically was like Naperville or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
it's like
Okay.
some suburb of Chicago. At any rate,
Okay.
so okay, so you go to Tony Robbins' event. What happens there?
Yeah, so I thought it was going to be like a sit down, here's your desk, like take a couple of notes, like Jim Rohn style or something like that. And I get there and it's like a 4-day rave. I was like, what is this thing? Like I come in, there's all these people who are on the seminar juice, right? They got their little name tags, they're like yelling and screaming. I'm like, the music is bumping, the room is super cold. I'm like, what is happening? And you get in and people are like pumping their fists, they're jumping. I was like, this is not what I expected at all. And I'll be honest, the first day I was super resistant. I was like, I'm not going to do all of this. Like, I'm going to just sit in the back of the room. This is cool. I'm going to high five a couple people. But then, he comes out on stage and he's this huge energy. He's a big person, but he's this big energy. And again, I'll be honest, I was very resistant. I was like, he's just a good speaker. He's just saying all this stuff. But as I was really listening to him, I was like, oh no, this man has a gift. Like, I get it now. Like, I get what people are saying, not because I was trying to drink the Kool-Aid, but if you ever actually go to it, like, he has a very genuine heart
Yeah.
about what he's doing. Like, yeah, he's gifted at marketing. And yes, he is a very gifted speaker, but he really is helping people on a super deep level. And it was probably by about day 3, where that's where it sort of broke open for me, because he did say, what you put into this is what you're going to get out of it. So I was like, you know what? I'm here. I might as well play full out. Like, I'm wasting my time and my money if I rip myself from this experience. And so I did. And that third day, there was just a moment. I'll never forget it. At the time, there was 5,000 people in this room, but it was a single floor. He wasn't in stadiums yet. So I stood in the back of the room and I just have this thing. Every time I go to a seminar or speaking engagement, I love standing in the back because I like to kind of see the scene that's all set up. And I was standing in the back by the camera people, and there must have been kind of this straight line down the aisle between me and Tony, because he was standing in the stage. I was just standing in the back, kind of just like mesmerized. And the way I describe it to people is, as I was watching him do his thing, like, it's as if everything kind of went quiet for me. I didn't hear the crowd, I didn't hear the music. And I just sort of felt this pulse of electricity down from the tips of my toes that went all the way up to the top of my head. And it's as if I heard a whisper saying, and this is exactly what I want you to do. And I couldn't believe it. Like, it kind of just hit me. And I was like, that's it. That is where all of this thing that I had been studying between psychology and mass communications and understanding people and working with entrepreneurs, and it was finally coming together, because I didn't know that executive coaching, performance coaching was a thing, honestly, until I went to one of his seminars. And the speaking and the transformation that he was doing, that healing aspect, that was the first time I had been exposed to that. I was like, that's it. And so I felt like I found my path. Like, this is the thing I couldn't name in college, but it's brought me to this point. And then 30 seconds later, the second thought I had after, like, yeah, I found my life calling. That's it. This is my passion. Let's go. I'm all in. My second thought was, yeah, Kamille, but he's a 6'7" white guy with a booming voice. You are a 5'2" woman of color with a small voice. Ain't nobody gonna hear you. You're not gonna be taken seriously on stage. I kid you not, Kevin. That's exactly what I thought. I couldn't believe it. And I left that room. I walked out and I just felt so depressed. I had went from, I found my life's calling, to, yeah, but you're not worthy of it. So don't even try, in all of like 1 minute. And that's when I started learning the power of the subconscious story. I didn't know that story lived there, because if I'm being honest, on the forefront of my mind, I don't believe that to be true. I've seen so many examples of incredible men and women who probably do look like me, who have done very well for themselves in that industry, but I didn't hear that in the moment. Because sometimes in your moment of greatest revelation or your moment of greatest stress, your old patterns, your old stories just boom, they just come out.
Yeah.
And that's where I started doing the work. like the deep work, like, uh-oh, if I'm really going to answer what I consider God's calling on my life, then I've got to get really in touch with the stuff that's been, I call it the demons inside of me
Yeah.
that have just been plaguing me for too long, because I can't help other people if I don't even know how to help myself. So I started coaching myself first. I started investing in coaching, doing the work. I can't even tell you how much money I have invested and continue to invest to keep developing myself. And that's eventually, I launched the coaching business in 2016, but it took me some time to get to that point, good 3 years of just like investing, studying. And then I launched my own practice.
That's awesome. So, 2016, though, that's still 7 years though, 7 years ago that you launched this. If I'm doing, shouldn't be doing public math, but 7-ish years ago that you launched that.
Mhm.
Did you, you mentioned before, like you kind of saw yourself as like, I'll be a speaker.
Mhm.
Uh, and I know that obviously think that's changed a lot, over the years. Like, not that you don't do speaking, but how is your, like, since from the time of launch to where we are today, we're recording this in the back half of 2023, like, how have you seen your coaching business kind of evolve and change?
That's a great question. So when I started, one of the fastest ways to create success, as I was taught, was to model it. And so that's what I did. I studied the people that I admired, the Tony Robbins, the Lisa Nichols, like all these famous motivational speakers who also had coaching programs. I just tried to model them. So I would go out and I would do seminars. At the time, I was working in Monrovia, California. I had an office space there with some of my real estate friends. And so I would host in-person workshops. I would invite people through Eventbrite. And they would get on my roster. They would become clients, and I would do one-to-one coaching with them. And eventually, as I got more and more of these one-to-one business coaching clients at the time, then I started creating sort of this group mastermind as a way to scale and grow. But a lot of my stuff was very much in-person workshops, or I would speak at other people's offices, or I would do speaking engagements, have a lot of real estate clients, so at their offices. And that's how I started, was just in person speaking, build my list, and then eventually get clients from there. And then I had a lot of private clients who they also had followings, and so they'd invite me to come out and speak to some of their team members, so on and so forth. Then naturally COVID happened. And I remember, because I had so many speaking engagements lined up for 2020. In fact, I was supposed to get married in the Philippines in 2020. And my husband and I, obviously, we changed our plans after we flew back from the Philippines in January of 2020, locking in the location, and then everything changed. But I very quickly knew, like, okay, so I'm not going to be able to do in person. What would it look like then to do this virtually? Like, I just knew it's going to have to shift very, very quickly. And thank goodness for Zoom. It was a saving grace. I was starting to Zoom in 2019, not Zoom, but I was doing like Facebook Lives. And then I think Zoom, I started like meddling with it in like 2019 for group coaching. And then by the time pandemic hit, I just knew, all right, I'm just going to shift this all into virtual seminars. And then that's obviously that kind of became the trend. So I got paid to do virtual speaking engagements, and I sort of had to master, okay, being present on a stage is one thing, that's a different art form.
Yeah.
Virtually, when you have an audience that's like chatting and then interacting with them, and then also being on the screen and then doing your PowerPoint, that's a whole different skill set. So that was just another thing that shifted. So essentially what happened was I went from mostly in-person speaking engagements as a way to get clients to now virtual webinars, which has now become kind of the commonplace thing. And then more of a focus on my group mastermind coaching. And then I only take a handful of one-to-one private clients. So it's sort of flipped. Before it was really big in person, big speaking engagements, one-to-ones, and then a little bit of group. Now it's like big group mastermind, because I do Zoom all the time now, a handful of one-to-ones, and then once in a while, the big speaking engagement, which, because it's coming back again, or at least that's what I've noticed, the in-person, people are getting more comfortable.
Definitely. So because let me ask you this question. So you obviously, you get to talk to a lot of people, different industries. Obviously I'm in real estate. You and I haven't talked about real estate even once in 9 months. So that tells me that the industry doesn't matter. What are some of the more common I don't want to use the word blocks, but I'll use the word blocks that you see come up, whether with your clients or just maybe even people you've just sort of spoken to over the years, that people that own businesses, what are some of the more common things that you see people sort of dealing with, that it's like, if you just made this tweak or if you overcome this one thing, like it would help a lot of people to kind of move forward?
It's a great question. Three things kind of come to mind in no order of importance or popularity as far as block, if that was the right term for it. But one is imposter syndrome.
Okay.
When people join my list, one of the first questions I ask them, my email list, one of the first questions I ask them is, what are you most challenged by right now in your mindset? Like, what can I help you with? And I get so many folks saying imposter syndrome. And that always fascinates me because I'm kind of curious, like, well, what exactly do you mean? And as I dig deeper, for some folks, it's, oh, I don't think I'm capable of this, or I'd like to do that. But it's kind of like, well, who am I to do that? So I see that a lot. And for some people, imposter syndrome stems from number two, that I see is a common thing, the comparison trap. So they start comparing themselves to other realtors, or they compare themselves to other realtors' highlight reels, to kind of quote you from earlier. And then they think like, well, how come he's doing this and that? He's not even that great, or she's not even that blah, blah, blah. And they're like crushing it in their numbers. What's wrong with me? And then once they start asking that question, it's very dangerous, that what's wrong with me? And often what I say is the primary question you use, like a what's wrong with me, think of your brain as a Google search engine, and it's just going to follow your prompt. So if you ask, okay, well, what's wrong with me? It's like, all right, let me tell you all of the things that's wrong with you.
Let's have a seat. We'll go over
Yeah,
the list.
right. So that's why, I understand your end goal is to try to quote unquote fix that or find a solution to it. But it's a really inefficient way of getting to that solution, because the mind is going to only do what you ask it to do, which is, I will get you the list of what's wrong with you, because that's really what you asked me.
That first of all, that statement right there alone is, I think, so valuable. The mind is only going to do whatever you ask it, because you can ask it to do something negative, like answer, fill in the blank, what's wrong with me, or you could ask it a more productive question, something that would actually get you, move you forward towards whatever your goal is, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I
And
know
that's,
from personal
go
experiences,
ahead.
like you help me to see that, like you help to ask that better question.
Mhm. Well, and it's to no fault of our own sometimes, until you're aware, by the way, then it is your fault, but that's a different conversation. But often you're just operating from default, is what I call it. Like I had that default pattern that I didn't know about, which was, instead of asking a better question of how can I become the best possible coach, speaker, let's say, transformational peak performance coach, for the people that I'm called to serve, I asked the question, well, who am I to do this? Because I'm only 5'2" and Tony Robbins is 6'7". I did the comparison trap, right? I thought because he was taller and bigger and a certain race, that he had a leg up. Now, whether or not that's actually true, it was very true in my mind. So regardless of external circumstances, I already tripped myself up. And when I finally overcame that story, realized that's not a block. And this here's, by the way, how I got over that. Another great person came along my path. So blessed again. And when I told them that exact story and what I was feeling, they looked me dead in the eye, just like my counselor did, and said, you realize that Mother Teresa was like barely 5 feet tall, and she changed the world. And she barely spoke, by the way. And I don't know why, but that just really stuck with me. It's like, duh. Why was I saying that? Oh, because I'm short, I can't have impact on people. He was like, and she barely spoke. And then he said, it has nothing to do with your physical size. It's the size of what's in here. So do you truly believe this is what you're called to do? And I said, yeah, with all my heart. And he's like, okay, then do what you need to do to become that person. I was like, oh, okay. And that's all it took. Sometimes it just takes one conversation with one person who can see past your fears, who can see past the BS you tell yourself. And in your case, I was able to just objectively see the question that perhaps wasn't serving you. And then I was able to say, well, what's a better question? What's an even better question you could be asking yourself? So I would say that, so those two for sure, imposter syndrome, when you think for whatever reason, you can't be this person, do that thing, you give yourself essentially an excuse to not fulfill your dreams. Number two, you fall into a comparison trap. You compare down instead of comparing up. And what that means is you look at other people and you put yourself down. I'm not doing what they're doing. They're doing better than me. And then you're doing less than. Versus comparing up, which is, oh man, if Kevin can do this, that's super inspiring. Heck, I'm smarter than that guy. I can do this, right? Or whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying they are smarter than you, but that would be an example of comparing up, right? It's like, hey, how inspiring. He or she is showing me what's possible. And that's what I needed to see with Tony was, man, look at this. He didn't even finish. He didn't go to college. He barely finished high school, and he was extremely poor, and he had all these things against him. Like, I didn't see that part of his story. All I saw was the outside stuff that I thought gave him a leg up. But I also didn't see the things that held him back, and yet he overcame those. And I was like, oh, I have no excuse. I have 2 degrees. I have a great family background. Like, that should not be the thing that holds me back, was seeing external aspects of him. So changing that story was essential. So we've got this imposter syndrome, we got the comparison trap. And I would say the third and final one, and it's what I created a program around, because since COVID, this has probably been one of the biggest issues with mindset that I've seen, is focus. There are so many distractions, so many shiny objects, especially in real estate, because I feel like realtors get targeted for a lot of the softwares that people have. There's always another lead gen company. There's another CRM. There's another ad thing. There's another do. And I coach so many high performance realtors that it's like they spend way too much time analyzing things that really it's like, oh, just put it on a Google sheet. Like, you don't even need that app yet. Like, just get your basic CRM there, do the basic calls, like fundamentals right now. But focus is such an issue. And when I say focus, it's really about, you got to eliminate the distractions, figure out what is super essential to you, what is vital to you, your business, your family, your life at this point in time. And this season, just focus on that. Because if you learn how to harness the power of your focus, you win. Because the current environment that we're in is no longer the information age. I think we're well past that. It's more the attention economy, if anything. And the reason I say that is because it's not about, oh, how do I get more information? I think when I was in high school, I was taught how to search on Google and how to find stuff. Now things are going to find you, and you don't have to look for it, right? You look like you were going to say something.
No, that is so true. I would agree with that completely. It's not the information. All of the information is out there. It's accessible to everyone at any time, no matter what, like 24/7. Couple things that you said that I just want to kind of circle back to. My business, in regards to point number 2, my business partner Fred is always, whenever we're talking with our team, with our group of agents at an event, and talking about like, hey, you're going to hear people on stage, and this can be part of their story. One of the things he always says is, listen, you can get inspired, or you can get pissed off. Either one, both of them are okay. Get inspired by the person, or get pissed off. Like, inspired by their story that you can do the same thing, or pissed off that they did it and you're not. And now let it give you permission to go out and do it. So I love that on point number 2 that you made. And then the last one, the focus, you and I have had a couple conversations recently around the concept of 10x is easier than 2x, the book by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And he starts off that book talking about the David. So, and how Michelangelo said simply, it wasn't hard to sculpt the David. I just cut away everything that wasn't the David.
Yeah.
To me, that's focus. Like, that is insane focus on, I just got rid of everything that wasn't actually the David. And that is, I feel like that's the one thing that we can do every day in our quote unquote job, is if we can just have a small amount of focus, even an hour a day of focus, but 2 or 3 hours a day, like, that moves the needle for almost all of us. Because again, it's the attention economy. So there's all these things vying for our attention that if we give into it, it's going to keep us anything but focused. Right. So I love that last point.
Yeah. I think if not just realtors, but any high performance individual, gosh, just any person, but really, if you're looking to up your game, take it to that next level, the main thing that I would say, if you could put a bunch of your energy into, is that power of focus. And the 2 aspects of focus that I think may be very helpful for someone who's like, yeah, but I don't even know what to focus on, is clarity and simplicity. Like, if I were to just give you 2 things, it's number 1, get hyper clear on what is the end goal. What is your vision? Because without clarity, focus doesn't really matter because you're not even clear what you're creating. So to go to your example of Michelangelo creating the David, he had a clear vision. He's creating the David. There is a sculpture of a person that he envisions, but not just any sculpture. I mean, to the T, with the muscle definition and the positioning of the hands, that it's anatomically correct. Like, he had a vision for the quality of the sculpture that he wanted to create. So that's important too, is knowing in high definition, essentially, this vision that you have for your family life, for your business. Like, what do you want? How do you want to design your life? And once you have the clarity of that vision, I would say the next step is keep it as simple as possible. What is the simplest next step for you to take? Because then what happens is I see people go, okay, I want this and this. And they're like, all right, I'm gonna need all of these things to get this. And just like you said with Michelangelo, he said, all right, when he has clear vision, the first step was not about adding things. The first step was, oh, let me get rid of the things that are not the David. So in simplicity, perhaps another word you could be using is the elimination of. What are the things in your business that you actually need to start eliminating that are not adding to that bottom line that you're looking to create? What are the things in your daily life that really are not dramatically moving you towards that end goal? What are the things in your habits that are not contributing to this vision? It's time to eliminate that. So focus is going to start with clarity, and the second step is going to be simplicity or elimination. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That, I think anybody listening to this who's ever run any sort of business or done anything, I think can relate to that and has had that challenge, if not having it currently. Like, it's definitely a reoccurring theme, in whether business or life or not. Again, I mentioned you and I don't think have even talked about real estate in 9 months. So it's really not about business. It is, but it's not. I mean, in fact, I told you that on our first call. Like, one of the things that I was like, I gotta call her. I don't know why, but I gotta call her. Part of it was Josh said to me, dude, she wouldn't even talk to me about business for the first couple of months. It really pissed me off. And then it was like, then I turned a corner and I was like, that's good. Like, I don't need to know. There's only so many strategies. Like, there's only so many ways under the sun to do things. And we all know the things to do. So if we know the things to do, then there's something preventing us from doing that. So let's work on those things, which is what I appreciate about you is that we've worked on those things and we'll continue to work on them probably for a long time. And those are the conversations I think we have to have.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, because now that I'm even reflecting back on, you're talking about my journey with Joshua Smith, right, of GSD, is in almost, I'd say almost all of my conversations, unless I'm guiding somebody on how to build a coaching business, because I know how to do that, right? So I can actually give you the tactics and the strategy for that. But for the most part, for my entrepreneurs who are not doing that, it is all on mindset. And at this point, I consider myself a perception and elimination specialist.
That's so good.
That's really what I'm doing, is I help you either enhance your perspective on a situation or a thing or whatever it is that you're looking at. And then I'm perhaps even helping you eliminate a lot of the fluff that just doesn't need to be a part of your high performance journey. Because it's so different when you have somebody who is objectively, basically emotionally unattached to your situation. Because I hear it all the time, like, well, gosh, Coach K, now that you say it, it seems so simple. Like, duh, why didn't I see that? And I'm like, well, you can't, because you're in it. And that's not your fault. It's hard because you're emotionally attached to it. I'm not. My job is easier because I'm sitting in the skybox. I get to watch you play. And of course, I can see the left defensive tackle coming at you. You can't, because you're focused throwing the ball to whoever, your running back or your wide receiver. So of course I can tell you, like, hey, that left side's about to come at you. And in hindsight, you're like, oh yeah, duh. But it's like, you're too focused on your game right now. You weren't going to see that, but I can see it because I'm up here.
So true. And by the way, just for the listener that doesn't know, Joshua Smith, like, I didn't repeat anything that he told me in confidence. He actually said that while we were recording a podcast.
Yeah.
And I know he said it in public multiple times. So Maybe we'll link to the show notes to that last episode with Josh. He's been on a few times. Um, but yeah, I would say too, that's my experience with you is number one, you ask me questions that I'm not asking myself about whatever the situation is, whatever the thing is that we happen to be talking about that week or that month or kind of that theme. You find a way to put it into those words into a question that really brings it down to a simple level. And then by the time we're done, you've also asked me questions that make it very clear as to where I go next. And I think that is for sure that's an art form. And that is helping somebody to do work if you're willing to actually participate anyways. And I know that's what I appreciate about you is like, you'll ask me the questions that nobody else is asking me because why would they? Right. And it's it's the question I want to ask. Like, I want to think about it. Like I want to think about the hard questions because I firmly believe that it's really not about the strategy or the next tactic or the software or whatever wants my attention right now or wherever my ADD wants to go. It's not about that. It's always about something deeper that's below the surface.
Right. Right. Well, and if someone's listening and they go, well, asking questions, can't I just find questions to reflect on online? Absolutely. Just like you can find information on how to run a great business online. Like all of this stuff that we've ever talked about, what you'll see on stages, it's all Googleable, if that's a word.
Yeah.
But what I've experienced personally, for me, and then also in working with clients, is the transformation comes from this sort of relational walk with another person, particularly somebody who is dedicated to what I call kind of being in your corner. Like my job, as I see it, the minute I engage with someone like you, Kevin, is all right, I'm in the ring with you, but I'm in your corner. So if I see you fighting and you're starting to tip, like I'm going to yell the next thing out to you because you can't, you're weary already. You're like, oh, I'm just going to throw my jab. And sorry for the overuse of metaphors, but it's just the way I think. I'm just throw my arm here and I'm like, no, this is going to come your way. You need to duck, or we need to take a break, or we need to stitch you up or whatever. But you have to have a team around you, especially if you're looking to play at an extremely high level. And when I say team, you don't have to hire like 1,000 people and have a posse, but nobody does this alone. And I think that's really important, especially for the person listening who's like, yeah, I want to get to this level and get to that level. Okay, then start thinking about, well, who's my success squad? And be honest with yourself. Like, who are the people that I'm spending the most time with? How am I investing in myself? Am I surrounding myself with just similar voices all the time too? Because I will say, I know there's a big movement on find the like-minded individuals, and I think that's really important. But as a leader, it's also good to have people who maybe don't think like you, who can provide a different opinion, because you don't want a bunch of yes people just because it makes you feel good. That's a different level of self-development. But having the person who's going to challenge you a little bit, maybe having someone who's going to provide a different perspective. And it doesn't mean you need to agree with them, but it's going to give you a much better, I'd say, outlook on the varied personalities that you're going to be dealing with. Not just your clients, but even the team that you're building.
Yeah, so true. I'm a big fan of if at least asking yourself questions, trying to understand the other side of an argument. But for sure, surrounding yourself with people that don't just completely act and think like you. I think
Yeah.
that first of all, that'd be boring. But second of all, that's just there's never a good end to only being around like-minded, quote unquote. Like I understand like the heart of it, where it's
Yes.
coming from is like you need a support group and all that stuff, but it's such a slippery slope. If you only hang out with people that think like you, then it's kind of like if you just, okay, great, we should all just read the same 10 books and nobody should have their own original thought and challenge what
Mm-hmm.
they believe. I feel like so many of the good things I've gotten out of life have come from me directly challenging what I thought.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm not really sure where I was going with that other than agree with that. Well,
Yeah.
so Kamille, before I talk about December, which I want to talk about in a moment, I'm sure there's somebody listening going, "Oh, I want to know more. Like, I want to hear more." If somebody wants to connect with you or kind of see what you're up to, take a sneak peek at what you do, what's the best way for people to do that?
Best way for you to, I call it get to know me, is just Google Coach Kamille Rose on YouTube. So as you can see my name right here, go on YouTube, or you can even put it youtube.com/Coach Kamille Rose. It's Kamille with a K. And I recommend them just watch a couple of the videos on there. Subscribe if you want to. You don't have to, but watch a couple of the videos just to get a feel for my style of how I talk, what my philosophies are on mindset. And then if it calls to you, reach out to me directly. And then me or my team, we can get a conversation going. But I think that's a good way to start. Is just kind of watch some of the stuff I talk about.
Awesome. Well, what we'll do is we'll put that in the show notes. We'll put a link there in the show notes. And then I'm excited because I get to I think it'll probably end up being the first time, unless something changes prior to that. Get to see you at NLA Live in Scottsdale this December. So December 5th and 6th, as many of you know already, we are hosting Next Level Agents Live again for the first time since 2019. And Kamille has graciously agreed to come out and speak to our group. So it's going to be an awesome day. We've got a few other really good speakers, a lot more announcements to come, but I'm excited to have you on stage, selfishly because I'm going to be in the front row taking notes. It's my party and I'm running the event, and I'll be in the front row taking notes, guaranteed. And so anybody who wants to hear more about Kamille and what she's doing in person as well, you'll be able to see her in Scottsdale this December. So
yeah,
I'm excited for
stoked.
that.
Yeah,
Me
I'm
too.
really excited because like I said, the in-person stuff was where I started. We kind of took a pause with that for COVID. So it's nice to be able to get back into the in-person gatherings again in the rhythm. I'm grateful for technology that unites us, but there's something really special about just being in the same room and having those conversations with people. So
There's a
that'll be fun.
balance. I agree. Technology's great. Zooms are great. Phone calls are great. And it's so much better when you can mix it in with like face to face. And
Yeah.
so I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm
Right
stoked. I'm
on.
really, really stoked.
Well, we'll put the YouTube link in the show notes. And anybody, you guys, like, I can just tell you from personal experience, reach out, watch a couple of videos, see if anything resonates. I can say wholeheartedly without any holding back that Kamille has completely made a huge impact in my life personally. Been through tons of personal challenges this year, as I've shared some of them on the podcast. And in a lot of ways, it's still been a very easy year, even though there's been some heavy stuff going on, with my heart and a few things. And somebody asked me the other day about like, how's it going? I was like, man, I just can't even imagine if I'd been facing this year without you. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm honored. And it really is, to go back to that moment I had with my counselor, and she asked me why do you want to do this? And I, without coercion, without trying to show face, I was like, I want to help heal people. But again, I didn't know what that meant. And in my own small way, I like to think that my big why is to just heal those mindset patterns and things that we've got. And maybe that would, even speed up somebody else's healing, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, so you can get to what I consider your God-given potential. And so, I'm grateful that I got to work with you. And that's why when people come to me, that's why I say, look, watch the videos. If it resonates, reach out, because I am not a hard sell. Like, I am not everybody's flavor, and I'm okay with that. But if you come my way, I will do my best to fulfill the why that I think has been placed on my heart to help you, to support you. So I'm grateful we've become good friends too, Kevin.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. Well, I'm excited for December 5th and 6th.
Cool.
And Kamille, I'll talk to you again next time without an audience present and listening in very soon. And Next Level Agents podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks a bunch.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.